Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another video. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the Offlane tier list for the Stockholm Major, and just like in the other two videos, this is completely based on the statistics from the Major, and so we're going to have a lot of heroes in the F tier and D tier. So let's just go over those really quick because there's so many heroes in there because of the top-heavy way that drafting works in the high competitive, captain's mode tournaments and these kinds of things. So in any case, F tier, we have all of these heroes here. They were pretty much not picked or they lost every single game. Pretty obvious heroes here like Bounty Hunter, Pudge, these kinds of things. Cheese picks like Brood. I'm surprised actually Axe didn't make it into the tournament like at all. I don't think it was picked at all. Maybe not even banned too, which is pretty surprising. I mean, I think this hero's gotten some interesting buffs over the past few patches, I believe. So I don't know. I think Axe is pretty strong in general in pubs, so I'm just kind of surprised it wasn't even considered at all. And then we did see a Darkseer game at the Grand Finals that was a horrible game for TSM. I think TSM choked a little bit in some ways, not only in the games, but also in the drafts where they picked like these weird heroes like Darkseer. I think they picked Leshrac and it didn't go very well. So these are all F tier heroes. I think that was the one Darkseer game and he lost. So there's also D tier here. We have all these heroes. Brewmaster was picked a couple times, which is really bad overall with the win rate. Just not a great hero right now. Spirit Breaker's fallen off since it was good a few patches ago. It was picked a few times later in the tournament, but I think it was mostly in the 4th position, not as an offlaner. And then Necro was the one. I'd already talked about Necro a little bit in the mid-tier list video, but this hero has fallen off completely. It's already a hero that has a hard time in competitive because it's super hard countered by offensive dispels like Enchantress and these kinds of things, or just in general by Nullifier. It just gets absolutely obliterated. So the fact that it had a bunch of small nerfs to just the general stats, like the regen that it gained when it uses its ultimate and all these kinds of things, just made this hero pretty much not playable at all. It was picked a little bit, but it was just absolutely terrible when it was picked, even from the off lane, mid lane, all those kinds of things. So it's really fallen off there. So that's D tier, that's F tier, pretty straightforward and simple, especially for the off lane. And now let's go to the S tier hero here. The number one S tier hero for off lane is Mars. Mars, I believe, was the most picked, most banned hero in the tournament. It was pretty much number one overall. This hero was like, basically, if this was not banned, it was picked in every game, pretty much. I don't know that it was always first phase banned, not every time. But if it made it through the first phase, it was going to be banned in the second phase almost every time or picked up because this hero just has been so good for so long. I think it's just the nature of the kit. It's kind of similar to Io and some of these other heroes that as long as this hero isn't just absolutely terrible, as long as there's like not horrible numbers on all of the abilities, it's just going to be overall a great hero because, it has this great stun, it has a good slow, it has a great teamfight ultimate on a relatively low cooldown, it's very tanky with its strength, has a good laning stage overall. There's just so many things about this hero that it's hard to really deal with in general. And I think even though this hero's been nerfed overall a lot in recent patches, one of the things that I think has made this hero still be good and be one of the best heroes this tournament was I think either whether it was a change like a nerf or a buff or in the patch or whether it was just a bug change. I think it was actually a bug fix that made this hero good. Is that I think a few patches ago there was something that said that heroes can no longer escape arena from like above it, like going above it, like Bat Rider or Night Stalker or like anything like this, like kind of just jumping over the arena. And I think that wasn't like fully implemented. I think you could still get out of arena. So they fixed that in a recent bug patch. I don't even think it was like in the update, in the like actual C or D or whatever. Maybe it was and I'm just forgetting. But in any case, they fixed that bug, and I think that just made this hero absolutely insane because now a bunch of heroes that have these ultimates or have these abilities that allow them to get out of the arena, that just no longer works. Now the only way to get out of this arena is to press BKB. That's literally the only thing you can do is have a BKB, and other than that, the arena is just so good. So it's always going to be good against like every support, so many offlaners, so many carries. You're going to be able to pin people to this wall. So now you can pin like 2 people. This hero is absolutely insane in all the different stages of the game. There's just no real weaknesses for the hero. Lanes well, mid game gets a blink, just kills people, takes your towers. He doesn't do a ton of tower damage, but it's like so hard to fight into him. If he has his ultimate up, which is a low cooldown, like you just have to be so scared of the hero unless you have some kind of save or something like that. So overall, Mars is just really good for all the reasons that Mars is good and has been good for so long. Now we're going to move on to the A tier, and the first hero here in the A tier is actually Enigma, and that's largely because Enigma was getting picked up later and later into the tournament, and this was pretty much the hero of the last few winners bracket, the grand finals, the loser bracket finals, all these kinds of different matchups later in the tournament at the main stage. Enigma was one of the key heroes, and that's largely because there was a lot of players that play a good Enigma, whether it's Saberlight or Taiga or these kinds of players that, are very good at Enigma. But just in general, this hero with Black Hole, with the way that it gets its farm, with the way that it denies range creeps and these kinds of things in lane, you just cannot count Enigma out. It's also able to be flexed, whether it's in the 4 position or the 3 position. It can be very dynamic in that way for drafts as well. And so Enigma has just been one of the great heroes in Dota in general, but also recently in Captain's Mode, in tournaments, and especially at the Stockholm Major. This hero was just really, really good. Whenever, I don't know what the win rate was, but it just seemed like, especially later in the tournament, whoever got Enigma later on in the tournament just won those games. Like, you just couldn't let Enigma through because it was so, so good. Next hero we have here is Underlord. Underlord overall, I think, a lot of people underestimated this hero, including myself in recent, tier lists and in pubs and things like this. It just didn't seem that great. But I think everybody kind of knew when they saw the change to the ultimate that in the back of their mind, if pro teams and pro players could get this hero to work, it could be very, very strong, because the ultimate, the Fiend's Gate, being able to basically teleport your entire team to a specific spot on the map is just so valuable. It can be so, so good. Not only to, gank, to contest Roche, all these kinds of things, but to have a big team fight. If you win that, you can just Fiend's Gate back to Fountain and then get everybody back in and push very quickly. There's so many ways this hero can be so good. It is able to, go to ganks across the map, so it's like a Spectre in that way. There's just so many dynamic things about this hero. It has a great laning stage. The damage reduction and the damage it can do, this Pit of Malice cannot be underestimated, especially against a lot of heroes that need mobility. So we have Storm Spirit, obviously, any spirit-like hero that needs mobility in fights, Underlord is just going to be really good against them. A lot of people have been going for Basher later on in the game to just even lock down a lot of, heroes through BKB and these kinds of things, because this hero can just become an actual good right clicker. So it's so hard to fight into Underlord. He's been very, very good, very, very popular, and people started to learn how to use his ultimate and play around it. And he's been, getting better and better throughout the tournament, and also just in Dota in general since they changed his ultimate. Next, we have Night Stalker here. And Night Stalker actually wasn't picked up like at all for most of the tournament. In the group stage, I think it was pretty much just ignored. And then as the tournament went on, it was picked a few times here and there. It was picked for Saberlight mostly with TSM. They actually were able to win a bunch of games, I think a few games with Night Stalker. And then in the grand finals, OG picked Night Stalker up instead of, against TSM. And I think I'm putting it up here in A tier because later on into the tournament, a lot of these offlane heroes were getting banned. Like, everybody was just banning Mars. Everybody was banning Enigma, especially against ATF. People were banning his Timbersaw. People were banning all these heroes. They weren't letting, Chaos Knight through, which is offlane plus a carry. They weren't letting these Beastmasters through because of the amount of, pressure you can apply. They weren't letting Amar have the Razor. So basically, it just the hero pool for offlane was getting completely limited, very severely limited, and one of the heroes that was constantly let through was Night Stalker, and it just became this really good, solid pick to get in the backlines, team fight, really well. Obviously, it has that downside of, nighttime. If, it's not night or you don't have your ultimate, you are very weak, and we actually saw that happen in the grand finals when TSM, they were doing really well. They were winning the game. They had Roche, but OG capitalized on a bunch of times where it was daytime or Night Stalker ult was just ending, and then that's how they turned the game around, which is very, very clutch. But Night Stalker is still a really, really good hero, especially later on into the tournament. DK is kind of the exact opposite. This hero fell off a little bit later on into the tournament, but was largely a very popular offlane pick for most of the tournament. It's just solid, stable, good stun, good initiation, very tanky, solid laning phase, very hard to win a lane against Dragon Knight. Now, obviously, you're not going to lose the lane, but you just go 50-50. You're even. It's hard to stop this hero from doing what it wants to do. It pushes towers really well. Just a great hero. But later on into the tournament, it did fall off a little bit. But overall, it was picked, banned, pretty high win rate. So generally, Night Stalker is Dragon Knight is A tier here as an offlane hero. Next, we have Beastmaster. Beastmaster and Lycan, which is in B tier, kind of were working their way up, where I think Tundra, largely, Gaming Gladiators, Tundra, these teams, these European teams that were pretty good in the tournament overall, they were picking a lot of these heroes with the tempo that they had to just destroy games. And that's pretty much what these heroes do. These kind of like Helm of the Overlord builders just snowball games and don't let anybody get back into the game. Don't let late game lineups kind of come online, and they would stomp games with Beastmaster, and Beastmaster was really good in that way. He wasn't picked, as much by TSM or even OG as much, but he was still relevant, and I think a lot of times he was getting banned out, especially in second or third phase, because he was just so good in a lot of different ways to counter a lot of things that other teams wanted to do and have a high tempo lineup. So that's why Beastmaster is up here in A tier. Then I have Chaos Knight up here, largely because this is one of the heroes of the tournament, was mostly a carry hero, but still was able to get played as an offlaner a lot of times, can still be viable as an offlaner, and so I'm putting him up here as an A-tier offlaner because we did see it get played in the offlane role occasionally. And then lastly, we have Razor here, and that's largely because of Amar, and OG obviously won the tournament, and this here was banned a lot of times because Amar having the Razor on the offlane, he just turned into another carry. It was absolutely ridiculous with this hero, so that's why I'm putting it up here as A-tier in the offlane because it just was so good. So those are all the A-tier heroes, and then we're going to move on to B tier. We have Batrider here, and this is largely because Batrider's a little bit of a cheese pick. It had a decent win rate, wasn't picked a ton, was banned a lot more than it was picked, I believe, largely because this is kind of like a cheese hero. For the last, 1 or 2 picks, if you get a Batrider and the enemy doesn't have anything to counter this hero, it can just snowball a game. So we saw it from the mid lane, from the off lane occasionally, and it had some good games, had some bad games, but overall it's a generally decent hero, especially kind of as a last pick cheese kind of thing. We also have Timbersaw here. This hero overall is not like the best hero, but it just seems like Amar, especially because OG won. If you give Amar this hero, he just is insane on the hero. He just dominates games. He dominates lanes. He does insane damage. He's just so good on this hero that they pretty much respect banned this hero first phase almost every time. It was kind of ridiculous how much attention this hero got, especially when Amar was playing it. So other teams didn't play very much Timbersaw. It wasn't the best hero of the patch, and that's pretty much why I'm not giving it, or of the major, sorry. I'm not giving it A tier because really I think it was ignored largely by most teams, and the win rate wasn't actually the best. I think it had a below 50% win rate, but it's just because Amar's Timbersaw was so good that it needed to be banned so much that I'm putting it in B tier because it was a viable and a relevant hero in the major. And then Lycan is basically at this point just a cheaper, or a bootleg Beastmaster. It's pretty much just like Beastmaster, but just people would rather have Beastmaster, but if they can't get Beastmaster, they're going to go Lycan. Obviously Lycan has a little bit of a different way of playing. His ultimate, he's a little bit more ultimate focused in this way where you run around, do a lot of damage, where Beastmaster's a stun ultimate. Lycan also can eventually buff up carries and things like that, but it's still played in general, generally the same way. You push towers, you're a tempo hero, you can do a lot of damage, these kinds of things. And then Death Prophet was a hero that was nerfed, so it was a little bit ignored, but then kind of came back onto the scene, and people realized this hero is still very popular, or very strong, even though you don't do as much tower damage as before because of the nerf. You still dominate lanes. Your Spirit Siphon is still absolutely insane. You're super hard to deal with, and if you snowball the lanes, if you snowball the game in general, it can be very, very hard to fight into you, to take Roche, these kinds of things against the Death Prophet that knows how to play Death Prophet. So I think in the early parts of the tournament, it was a little bit ignored, but it started becoming more relevant. Picked a few times, had some good games, but then was banned a lot later in the banning stages because it did fit a lot of drafts and was pretty good, so that's why I'm putting it in B tier. And then lastly, we have C tier here. Basically, we have Sand King first, and Sand King was kind of going into this major, and probably before the big patch that dropped before the major, this was like the offlaner of the meta. And it was actually being played mid a lot too. It's very, very strong, but it just had, nerfs to Sandstorm, nerfs to some of the talents that especially affect Sandstorm. And I think because of that, it's just not that great. It had a pretty bad win rate, I think in like the 30 percentile. It was picked a decent amount, but it just wasn't that great. Kind of similar to Tidehunter here. Tidehunter was picked a decent amount, but just didn't have a great win rate and wasn't really picked as much as some of these other offlaners. Wasn't hotly contested. It just kind of felt like a default that you had to fall back on if there was nothing else that was good, or it worked into your draft pretty well. Viper pretty much is here basically because of Amar. Like if his Timbersaw, Razor, some of these other heroes were banned, he was getting Viper a couple times and he stomped with it, and that's pretty much why it's here. Slardar not picked very much at all, but I think it was picked maybe 4 or 5 games and it had a very good win rate. I think it only lost like a game or so, and so that's why it's here and not in the DRF tier. I'm actually surprised this hero didn't get more play. I think it actually is a little bit more viable than people give it credit for. Doom is in C tier because Doom was actually picked almost more as a 4 position. It was picked as an offlaner occasionally, but this hero was actually picked more as a greedy 4, where you just kind of let the offlaner, whoever the offlaner is, lane almost solo. You kind of just help them get maybe a couple levels and then make sure they don't die, and then you just leave and you devour creeps in the jungle. You like do all this kind of stuff with Doom, and you just get a second offlaner, a 4th core from that 4 position, and this hero was just super viable in that way. But as an offlaner, just not as good. So I'm putting it as a relevant hero, but just not as an offlaner. Same thing with Kunkka. Kunkka was more of a mid laner. I think it was played offlane a little bit, but just not a lot, so that's why it's in C tier. Same thing with Pango. Pango was mainly a mid laner, not really an offlane hero, so I'm not putting it, up higher here. I'm just putting it here because it was relevant, but not really as an offlaner. And that's the same thing with Nature's Prophet. I'm not putting it in, D or F tier, but I don't know. It might have played a few offlane games. I actually didn't watch every single game. I don't know. It was more of a carry, but I believe it played a couple offlane games. So it's not like it was completely irrelevant, but I'm just putting in C tier because of that. So that is the offlane tier list for the Stockholm Major. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. If you think anybody should be moved up or down, etc., etc. Like I said, this is largely based on the statistics, but regardless, let me know what you think. If you like the video, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. Go to the Discord, link below, join that. Very active community. It's really great to have everybody there. I want to get, even more activity there. Request replay reviews, all these kinds of things, talk about Dota, etc., etc. And there's also the Patreon link down below. If you want coaching, you can go there. Or if you just want to support me in general, if you want to see more videos like this in the future, consider supporting me there at my Patreon. So as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.